Miss Cater's assessment of her teaching experience through her own self-reflective journals, done by James Robertson, Gina Piama, Carrie Maynard, and Shane Jones. What an amazing day! I just found out that I'm going to be a teacher. Imagine me, a teacher. Who would have thought it? It is going to be great. I mean, I already know so much about being a professional chef, and I especially know a ton about French cuisine. It only makes sense that I teach the next generation of culinary students, right? I'm so excited. I spent all day thinking about it after I got the call from the College of Excellence. It's funny, because I almost didn't think they would call. I didn't really put a whole lot of work into that application, and really only did it because Diana kept pushing me to. But I guess my experience in the field just spoke for itself. These students are going to thank their lucky stars they got me as their teacher. I know so much. There is lots they can learn from me. Now that I think about it, I should have applied to be a teacher sooner, so I can make more students smarter. I'm going to teach just like my teachers taught me, only better. I'm going to make my students love me, so they will want to impress me by working hard and getting great grades. And if they do get good grades, guess who looks awesome? Me. I can't wait. I wonder how much a dean makes. Well, I'm in week 3 of my course, and it's not all what I was expecting. This is not how I remember college. College was all about moving from one lecture to the next, with the professor droning on and me trying to write down verbatim as much as I could, as fast as I could. It worked for me, because I got good grades. But these students are nothing like that. They might be taking notes, but I can't tell if they are, because they all have laptops, and they are all banging away on the keyboards, which I find distracting. I bet they're playing on the internet. I knew teaching was going to be weird right away. I started my first class by telling them who I was and what I had accomplished. I expected respect, appreciation, and maybe some applause. But all I got was blank stares. It's like they don't even care what I've done. In my second week, a student asked me for my lecture script. Imagine. She might as well ask me for the test in advance. Yet another student asked me if I had any presentation slides to give him. I was shocked. I mean, if he can't follow along with his simple lecture, then he shouldn't be in college, right? They better start listening soon, or they will all fail, and that will make me look bad. My final class is tomorrow. I survived it, but this wasn't the experience I thought it would be. I have one last test to give, but I'm not sure how much the students absorbed. Their test scores have been really low. I don't get it. I've told them everything I know, but I'm not sure they've listened well enough. Some of the students even fell asleep. The whole course, they have looked at me like I was speaking a different language. I have no problem teaching the new employees at work. Why should teaching be any different? After the last test, the students told me there was too much to remember and that some of the test questions weren't covered in class, but I know that I covered everything in my lectures. I shouldn't have had to write it on the board or anything. These are adults, and they should be able to take their own notes. I thought by the time these students got this far, they would be more professional, like better prepared. It's not my fault if they didn't get it, is it? I know I'm a great chef, but I'm starting to wonder if that means I'm a great teacher. I have a bottle of Merlot that I've been saving to celebrate my success, but now I'm going to drink it and try and figure out what went wrong. Well, the course evaluation results for my first foray into teaching arrived today. They were, shall we say, a bit underwhelming. I suspected they would be, since 2/3 of the class got less than 60%. The highest mark in the class was only 73%. The results were pretty much what I expected. The students felt like I talked at them and not to them. They felt like there was too much information, They didn't like my lecture style. There were some nice comments, though, in the course of Oz, where a couple of students thought that I really knew my stuff, and they appreciated having a professor with real-world experience. But somehow, that didn't translate into effective teaching. I've been doing my homework since the course ended, and I think I know what happened. I went about this all wrong. I thought my job was to teach the students everything I knew. But that knowledge, it took me years to acquire through experience and mistakes. I should not have expected the students to turn my experience into their learning. They need to build their knowledge in the sort of the same way I did. I should have structured the course to teach them some basic concepts and let them take control of their own learning. I could have been there to guide them if they needed me as they constructed their own knowledge. As I dug into this a bit, I found a really neat method of structuring the learning environment. It was on a website, and it had a triangle in it that showed the relationship between learning objectives, assessment, and instructional activities. I started to appreciate the role and impact each has on the other. I put no thought to any of this while I was composing my lectures. No wonder why my students struggled. I understand now that I didn't have clear objectives laid out for my students. They didn't know what their goals were or how I was getting them there. I didn't give them a target that they should aim for. I should have composed some learning outcomes and then designed the evaluations and activities so that I could see if the outcomes were being met. I was so concerned about pouring out my own knowledge to them that I never thought to ask myself, at the end of the course, what should they be able to do? My outcomes should have included conditions and criteria and be clear and measurable. I should have chosen my words to reflect the way in which I was expecting my students to demonstrate their learning. And finally, I should have tied them to assessments along the way. I always disliked tests as a student, so it's no surprise that I paid almost no attention to assessing my own students. Tests are a pain. They stress out the students and they're a lot of work for me to compose and mark. But I always thought you had to have tests. It's the only way to give a grade, right? Through my research and self-reflection, I have now come to realize that my assessment methods weren't appropriate for my course. Having all tests be worth the same, but disproportionate in content, was not fair to my students. Because of my busy schedule, I chose the easiest and simplest way of testing to help cut down on marking time. Now, in hindsight, I realize that using that method doesn't allow the students to show what they actually learned. My tests only allow the students to regurgitate the information that I deemed worthy of their attention. I realized that formative feedback would have helped my students stay connected to the course, as well as help me to ensure some learning has taken place. I feel if I had structured my assessments differently, I can help my students achieve a deeper sense of learning. Assessments are the only thing I need to structure differently. Quite simply, the way I taught or my instructional activities weren't appropriate. In fact, there were no activities at all. My lectures were all one way, didactic, content-based instruction. I thought it was my job as a teacher to make sure that they knew what I know. I realized that's not the case. I came across a cool book called Tellin' Ain't Trainin'. It talked about learner-centered education. My instruction was definitely not learner-centered. It was all about what I knew and what I had to tell. The next time, I will do my design differently. I really need to focus on my learning outcomes and design backwards from there. I found a book on that idea too. Backwards Designs helps me know that I'm working with my students towards a clear goal we all share, and it prevents me from exposing them to content that isn't relevant at that stage in their learning. I think it's called cognitive load theory, where I'm basically overloading my students with too much information that they can't put into context. I know the context, but they don't. Well, I really wish I had done this digging before I jumped into this teaching thing. If I had known what I know now, I would have done so much differently. At least I've learned what doesn't work and why, so that next time I can be both a great teacher and a subject expert. And there will be a next time, because I'm going to apply to teaching positions now, not because I think I have so much to give, but because I know I have so much to learn. References: